that used to be a lot more of a problem in the early days
It's
of
getting a
Wayland.
lot better.
Like
Yeah,
when, especially like you were saying before, where you had SWC, which didn't even, this was before Layer Shell, so it had a custom way to do bars. That's just
yeah.
like, yes, Kwin has their own thing, but like those are desktop environments. Those are sort of intended to be used with the shell
They
they build.
integrated with themselves. Yeah,
Right. But when we talk about things, that are built with Mia, that are built with W Roots, that are built with Smithy, that are like, Hyperland, like all of these make use of Layer Shell. So at this point, that
you
issue
have to
is
implement
pretty
it.
much just eliminated.
So this is the problem. I think probably the main problem with Wayland. This is
Mm.
one thing I agree with all the haters on, is that the time it takes. You've probably I think you've mentioned this in your videos. The time it takes and the uh insane statements people make in the discussions about when they're creating new protocols. It's not great. I think it could probably be done in a better way. Like the session restore protocol took ages, or the zones protocol that was really needed.
The
Like
worst
there are a
part
lot of
about
people.
Session Restore is everybody agreed that it was a good thing. It wasn't even like an argument about do we want it. Everyone was just arguing about the correct way to do it.
Yeah, it's. I think it's just stupid, to be honest. And then the zones protocol is something that was really needed. The one where you have multiple, like for stuff like KeyCAD where it's multiple windows. There are so many people. I feel like they were kind of brushing this off as it wasn't a real use case. But there are a lot of people who are using software that just needs that support.
Mhm.
And it's just ridiculous not to have it. Now, in my opinion, everyone just sits there and complains about it. What I would have done if I was using that software is I would have just made a protocol that does that, implemented it into SWC, and then just patch the software I was using to use it. And then eventually maybe I would upstream or something, or I would wait till they made a real protocol for it. But I think people just have to start taking initiative a little bit more. Okay, it's open source software, so you take the software and you do the thing you want to do with it. Be solution oriented, people. Okay, don't just complain. Just fix it yourself. That's what I think.
Yeah, there actually has been. Now it's time to get into like the Linux boomer talk. There has sort of been this change in the kind of person that uses Linux, and this, I don't know when it happened, but if you look at the early days of Linux, before GUIs were, as widely available as they are now, most people using Linux, if you're back in like the early 2000s, if it like pre-Ubuntu, let's just say pre-Ubuntu, most people using Linux at that point were developers or developer interested, something developer adjacent. Like they were most likely doing something in that space. Whereas now, it's pretty much dead simple. Like you can just install like a CachyOS, a Fedora, pretty much anything, and you don't have to ever even open a text editor, look at a line of code, and that has completely changed the kind of person that uses Linux. At this point, you don't even need to have like a development background or any interest in development. And I think that's a good thing because it means things are actually in a good state. But at the same time, you also have the issue where a lot of people don't even realize that the only reason this exists is because people are actually writing the code. The only reason this exists is because there is this ecosystem of volunteers who are trying to make something.
I think it demonstrates that from a use perspective, Linux is at a really good point where like anyone basically. I mean, I installed like Debian Mate Mate on my friend's computer, and he's like using it for school, and he was using it for school for a bit, and like that. So it shows like you can just pick stuff up and do it, but at the same time, when a person is using Windows or some other operating system like Chrome OS, they aren't really considering. They don't say like, "Oh, think of all the paid volunteers from Microsoft who worked on this, who worked with operating system." Whereas I think this is something that some of the decimal environments have been doing, where they have like their little donation
Yes.
notification that pops up like once a year. I think it's kind of good to remind people that like this is free software, open source software made by normal people mostly for just normal people. So, and you should treat it in that way. And if you have a problem, don't just cry about it. Maybe try learn something, or try help someone, or report it. Like to take a bit of initiative. I feel like that's the way to go. But also, I feel like a lot of I really want to make at some point a user-friendly desktop environment that isn't needlessly overcomplicated. I feel like that's something that doesn't exist. I mean internally overcomplicated, because they all use like dbus and GTK and stuff like that I really don't like or agree with. So I want something that is like a Linux Mint style thing where you can just pick it up and use it, and it's easy, but it's not ridiculously terribly designed.
Mm-mm.
I don't know if I'll be able to do that, to be honest, because those sort of projects take a lot of people who know about interface design and who know about making things easy. I find it hard to make things easy because I like to make my life really hard. So, but that is something I want to do because I feel like at the end of the day, like the more people using a free operating system, the better. Whether it be a Linux or a BSD, I feel like that's also underappreciated. Make sure your software works on all Unixes, guys. It's important. For me, at least.
I think you can definitely say that, like, because a lot of these big desks, like your GNOMEs, your KDs, things like they've been around for a while now. You know, going on 30 years very soon. There has sort of been this sort of like, you've had these rewrites into new toolkits. You've had this like feature creep over the years, and obviously GNOME pulled back a lot of features over the years and tried to like simplify things. But you're gonna have that sort of problem where it is difficult to wrap your head around a code base that has been around for that long, that whilst they might have had some like general guidelines on how to write the code, it's not something that was, you know, fully architected from the start. We have like build documents on how to abstract different components. It's mostly just done through vibes, done through code guidelines, and adding things on as individual developers want to add things on, and then developers review the code like, oh, that makes sense, and it's mostly fits together and mostly works. But because of that, I think a lot of people do find it, especially for the established projects, find it hard to, I guess, see how to get involved in that. And yeah.
That's something I really struggled with when I was getting to programming. It's kind of hard to just like make a PR, or make a contribution. Like you don't really know where to start, or you don't really know what like an open problem is. I try and make my projects like approachable to contribute to. I hope I'm doing that. Anyone who's watching, like, make something with my stuff. Like you can email me, you can contact me. Like, I just want to, I want to make sure everyone can like contribute. That's something I'm committed to. That's why, I mean, Codeberg is terrible. It always goes down. But I keep my stuff, at least my distribution stuff on Codeberg because it's easy to make a PR. It's not as easy to use the git send email pack thing on SourceForge. So I like to keep some stuff on Codeberg so people can easily contribute without having to learn how to use Git too much, because Git is complicated, right? But making contribution accessible is something that's important. And there are a lot of like, I know when I was starting to get seriously into Linux programming, I mean, I was always programming. When I was like doing Linux Edge programming, I was just making my own stuff, and I was never like contributing to other people's stuff, which maybe has led to like this cool stuff happening. But it's also important, like there are all these projects out there, like there are loads of people who are solo working on like cool stuff that they might not finish if they don't get contributors. So like look out, and it's never that hard to reach out to someone like to try and make a contribution. The thing you said about architecting, like how it just kind of builds up in these layers, that I think the reason that happened is because I watched this video. It's I forgot the guy, he's like a really smart guy. It's I think it was called the One Unbreakable Law in Software. And he just explained that software takes the shape of the organization that's working on it. So when you have like, I don't know, Microsoft isn't that organized, but let's take Microsoft an example. They have all these teams that like
Molly Rocket.
Yeah, that's the channel. That's not the guy's name, but that's his channel.
Okay. Yeah.
When you have let's say they have different software teams working on like different stuff, and they kind of split it, and you kind of get that shows in the software where the thing is abstracted. Like let's say they have a sound team, and that sound team is working on 3 different things, or the sound team is split into 3 different teams, so each work on 3 different things. That comes out in the software where it might be abstracted in 3 different ways. With open source projects, when it's not like a super centralized organization, what generally happens is there's a developer, and its contribution to a sort of just going on top. So that I think that's why a lot of open source software ends up in this sort of like pile of trash, like software architecture, where it's just stuff laid on top of stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff, because the way that it's organized is literally just a guy and then a contributor going on top of that, and then another contributor on top of that, and on top of that, and on top of that, where people aren't really working in like synchronized teams. So that's why we have this problem in Linux and open source of like poorly architected designs, in my opinion.